Good day and welcome to the Using Virtual Technology in Fatherhood Programs call hosted by the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn the call over to Nigel Vann. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our webinar today, Using Virtual Technology in Fatherhood Programs. We're going to start out with a short video message, so I'm going to ask my colleague Enzo, working behind the scenes here, to pull that up. It's going to take about 15 seconds to watch this. So thank you very much for that, Enzo. And just so you know, you can find that video message on our homepage at fatherhood.gov. We've been sharing the video message through social media and other networks. And the idea is we want to reach all dads at this critical time and help link them to helpful resources if they come over to our website. The goal for today's webinar is to help think through how fatherhood programs and others working with children and families can continue to provide those important services using virtual technology. And we've been talking with a few practitioners and teachers. I know many of you are working to figure this out there. And I do know that several programs have begun to offer virtual services. Others are piloting various approaches, while yet others are still in planning stages. I think basically we're all learning and trying to figure out how best to stay connected with dads at this time, and looking for ways to help dads make the best use of time with their kids if they're at home with them, or if they don't live in the same household as their kids, to find ways to stay connected. Now, we're tentatively planning a follow-up to today's webinar, possibly in June, and the idea is that we'll have a few programs share examples of virtual approaches that have been working for them as we get started in this new phase of providing fatherhood services. So what we're looking at today is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation, and today's presenters are going to help you think about various approaches so you can decide what will work best for you based on the technology that you and your fathers have access to. Now, I just want to draw your attention to a few things on the screen here. In particular, in the left-hand side, I see most of you already found our chat box, so please do feel free to chat in there. We may even ask you some questions during the webinar so you can respond to that in there. We're really interested in learning what you're doing, what you're thinking at the moment, what kind of activities you may have started to try and do with fathers virtually. If you've got a particular question for the presenters, we ask that you put that in the Ask a Question box at the bottom, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And the presenters have all agreed to stay on for an extra 15 minutes just to make sure we have time to answer all your questions. Any questions that we don't have time for, we will either post written responses, or if we do this webinar in June, we'll also try and address any leftover questions then. You'll also see in the downloadable resources box that you can download bios for today's presenters. There's a list of helpful resources, and I believe we'll be adding this PDF of the slides in there. I don't see those there at the moment. But now, let me just see what I'm doing here, because we are now going to take another step forward in the use of virtual technology here. So you should all be able to see me on your screen now, and we're going to get all the presenters on here shortly. So, you know, we've been doing these webinars at the Clearinghouse since 2007, and we've changed the virtual platform a few times since then, but this is now the first time we've actually done video presenters, so we're stepping into the brave new world with everybody else. As you see on this slide, the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse provides resources to fathers, fatherhood programs, researchers, and policymakers. I'm not quite sure how this chap and his kids got on that rock there, but if you do have any questions about rock climbing, we wouldn't be able to answer those, but we would be able to answer any other questions here via our email. help@fatherhoodgov.info, and we always encourage people to call our national call center, 877-4DAD-411. We particularly encourage you to have parents call that. We have trained mediators on the end of that line. So one thing we do know is that there are aggravated co-parenting situations at the moment, particularly if non-resident parents don't have access to their children and aren't able to do that virtually. So anybody who wants to call that national call center line, we'll say we have trained mediators there that can talk to people. You can get resources from our website, and we encourage you to engage with us by Facebook and Twitter. Co-parenting. Some of you may remember we had planned to do this as our webinar today. We preempted that because of the current situation, but we are going to do the Co-parenting 201 webinar on May the 20th, 4 weeks from today, at the same time as today. We're trying this new time. We thought it would be easier for people on the West Coast, and if you've got kids at home, maybe you can get everything out of the way and be ready. So, and we are seeing record registrations for today's webinar, and I'm pretty sure we're getting very far. I think we probably passed the record attendance as well. So that just speaks volumes to where we all are right now in trying to think through how to do this. So we've got a great lineup of presenters to help you think about this today. And I'd now like to ask each of them to activate their cameras and come join me at the top here. And then I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. So if we can start with you in that left-hand box there, Jeff, just tell us who you are, and you'll be saying a bit more very soon.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon. This is Jeff Street. I'm the president and CEO of VIA Consulting Group. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jeff. Kenny?
Yes, my name is Kenneth Graswell. I am the CEO of Fathers Incorporated, as well as the prime contractor and project director for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse.
A very important person. Yeah. Justin?
Hey there, I'm Justin Batch. I'm the founder and chief dad officer of Daddy Saturday and the Daddy Saturday Foundation.
Thanks, Justin. And then we'll go to that very smart chap in the right-hand box. I can't tell who that is. You're on mute, Patrick. You're on mute.
My name is Patrick Patterson. I'm the program manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. I'm really glad to be here today. Thanks, Nigel.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah. And so, as I said, we're going to have a session at the end, and we are going to stay on. I think maybe someone needs to mute the phone. I think I'm hearing an echo here. Sorry, guys. So anyway, we're going to stay until 4:15. Before I introduce Jeff, there are a couple of things. We're going to show a short video first, so if you can pull that up, Enzo. This is from sesamestreet.org/caring. You'll find this resource and a link to this video in our helpful resources list. There's a bunch of helpful stuff on the Sesame Street site. They really are putting some great things together for kids and families. So this video that's about to pop up is going to be a short, well, it's about a minute off. It's a message from Elmo's dad, Louis.
Hey there, it's me, Louie. I just wanted to say...
Can you help Elmo make a pillow for us, please?
Just a second, Elmo. I'll be right there, son. You know, it is wonderful to get to spend so much time with our children, but can also be a bit overwhelming. But I just wanted to say, parents, you are doing an amazing job. Remember, though, it's important to take some time for yourself. You know, take care of you. You can listen to your favorite song, and stretch, or just take a moment to breathe. Come on, breathe with me right now. Huh? Take a slow, deep breath in, and then breathe out. Feels good, huh? We are all doing the best we can, and that is okay. No, it's better than okay. It's Daddy! Okay, son, I'm coming. Looks like I have to go. Time to make a pillow fort. You hang in there and keep up the great work.
caring for each other. Visit sesamestreet.org/caring for videos, activities, and tips for the whole family.
Like I said, I think that's a pretty powerful video, so thank you, Enzo, for bringing that up. We're now going to go to a couple of poll questions, and then we will get rolling with Jeff here. So we can have the first poll question, Enzo. So we just wanted to hear from you, check all of these, that apply to you. What types of virtual services are you providing currently or planning to provide for your participants? So the clear winner here is case management. We've got about 70% of you doing that. A lot of information sharing going on. More than half of you are doing information sharing. And close to 50% doing some kind of curriculum groups. Peer support groups, about 30%. Connection to community resources, another high one. You've got 65% people doing that. And in fact, that's closing in with a tie on case management. So, okay, well, thank you very much for that. It just gives us a sense of what you're doing. And now we've got a second question in terms of the technology that you're using. So we're just interested to know what kind of tools you may be using already or considering using to provide virtual services. Yeah, wow, we got over 80% of you doing or thinking of doing something with video conferencing, which obviously is the way we want to be connecting. 30% doing some kind of webinar platform like we're using today. Half of you doing social media, email, a lot of people, a lot of one-on-one phone calls, and conference calls. But anyway, clear winner here is video conferencing followed by email. So thank you very much for that. And we can close that out, Enzo. So I'll bring my camera up just for another second here. I'm just going to introduce Jeff. So Jeff, if you want to get back up here with me. And I'm just going to say a few words about Jeff. He's a technologist, a social impact investor, and an entrepreneur. A lot of those words I don't understand. And Jeff has some wonderful things to say. He's going to really rock your boat here in a minute. But he's created 4 successful startups. He's built numerous statewide and global technical solutions, working with folk across the U.S., Latin America, Canada, Australia, and Africa. And he's now working closely with us here at the Clearinghouse to build our virtual collaborative community that we mentioned on our last webinar. And we're really looking forward to getting this kick-started in the next few months. And that'll be another way to continue these kind of conversations. And I'm still learning something every time I talk to Jeff. So anyway, Jeff, the time is yours, sir. Please tell us all about it. I'll bring you first slide for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nigel. Really appreciate it. And again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about, using virtual technology and selecting the right tools. And I just want to add maybe one other word, selecting the right tools for you. And that's very important. So let's go ahead and get started. What I like to do whenever I'm talking to governments, businesses, small businesses, nonprofits, or individuals, I really like to start establishing some guardrails. And so we're going to start with a few rules when it comes to virtual tools. One is you can only move or change an impact what you can manage, right? So if you can't manage 5 pounds, you won't be able to manage 10 pounds. If you can't move 5 pounds, you won't be able to move 10 pounds. So when selecting a virtual tool, you have to start thinking about what that tool, what capacity does it have in moving and staying and helping you move your business or the services that you're providing. And then in addition to that, it's like whatever, or you can only manage what you can measure. So if you can't measure things, it's going to be hard to manage. And if you can't manage it, it's going to be very difficult to move. So let's just say in the fatherhood space, if you wanted to make an impact, okay, how will virtual tools help you in making that impact? How will virtual tools help you manage that impact? How will it help you measure whether you're making an impact or not? And then rule number 2 is business drives technology. Technology never drives business. And so I'm going to give you an example of a prospect I was talking to one day, and they sent me an email. And I won't read all of the pieces here, but I'm going to highlight some points. So they wanted a software called HighRise that would cost about $600 a year. And then they were thinking about Salesforce. Then they also were thinking about a tool that would collaborate. Oh, by the way, they wanted push pay for donations. They wanted, it cost about $3,000 a year and maybe some small transactions, about MailChimp. And then they said, hey, what about Zoom? And also Teachable. So all of a sudden, what rules did they violate based on the slide I shared previously? They violated both rules. I don't see anything about what they're going to manage, how they're going to measure, what tools will help, how will they use virtual collaborative tools to help with that. And also, it looks like business is not driving technology. It looks like from this email right here, technology is driving the business. And so again, I just wanted to highlight that. Hopefully that's not any of you, and I don't believe that is, because I saw a lot of those high scores when it came to virtual tools. But if it is you, and even if it's not, if you're looking to really incorporate virtual technology in a greater way, here are some questions to ponder. Number one, what problem are you trying to solve? And as it relates to it, how big is that problem? We'll get to that question a little bit more. But when it comes to that problem, the second point is what role or what primary role are you looking to play? And what I mean by that is, are you looking to be a consumer, maybe just supporting fatherhood or other initiatives? So you buy, support, learn, buy courses and connect with folks. But maybe in addition to consumer, you want to be a creator, maybe a creator of content where you're looking to sell, you're looking to train, you're looking to provide more services using virtual tools. But then if the problems are too big, maybe you want to collaborate, where you want to co-create things to solve fatherhood initiatives or fatherhood problems. So again, 2 questions to consider when you're looking at virtual tools is, one, what problem are you trying to solve? And solving the fatherhood problem is just too broad. Maybe it's child services, fathers need child services in order to work. Maybe you drill down a little further there and then begin asking that question. What problem are you going to solve again, and what will be your primary role? Will you be a consumer supporting fatherhood products and services? Will you be a creator, or will you be a collaborator? And again, we're asking about your primary role. The next question to consider is, can the tools you use or you select support your growth? So maybe today you're serving a small group, and maybe next year it's the state, and then the year after that it's the world. I often find that when it comes to selecting tools and virtual tools, many people, they focus on not failing and not focusing on succeeding. And so in this question, maybe focus on, what does success look like? And when you look at your success, project how, and when you're talking to vendors or you're looking at selecting a tool, ensure that that tool can grow with you, right? Not just around pricing, like the individual said in that email I shared. So now that you've understood maybe the first 2 rules, and you begin looking at the problem you're going to solve, and you're going to be looking at what's going to be the boundaries or how the growth of that, it's now going to start narrowing down into the virtual tools, the different types of tools. I like to break them into what I call 6 categories. The first category is your virtual gathering. And we're all familiar with that, whether it's public gathering or private gathering on virtual tools. It's a place where you can come together. So some examples are on the slide here, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. There's thousands of software tools out there, or virtual gathering tools, Facebook probably being the most popular. And we'll begin even drilling down on how do you then even select the best tool here for you, or the best type of tool. But in addition to virtual gathering, you have virtual communication. We're seeing firsthand, the two coming together, actually, virtual gathering and virtual communication. More and more live video, email, texting, surveys, things like that. Those are not unique, but again, when you're looking to incorporate it into the service you're going to deliver, when it comes to fathers or service, any type of service delivery, now all of a sudden there's going to be some other things that we'll get to you that you're going to have to factor in. But again, these are just categories that we're highlighting right now. So virtual gathering, virtual communication, and virtual learning. Virtual learning, again, there's a lot of tools out there. You really have to begin looking at which one is best for you. How will it grow? Will it drive your business, or will your business drive it? How friendly are the vendors when it comes to you wanting to incorporate these tools into the services you're offering? What about a few other things that I'll mention right here when it comes to crowd servicing? Now, if you notice, we went from virtual gathering, virtual communication, virtual learning to crowd servicing. But what I like to share is basically the difference is going from the cloud to the ground. How do you do service like we're doing online, but then immediately be able to change that service or move that service to physical locations or touching individuals, if you will, being to deliver that service? And so a good example there could be Uber. Uber's entire business model is pretty much in the cloud, but you see how it operates on the ground when it comes to the food delivery. Many of you probably have received food from Uber, during the shut-in in some areas. As well as Airbnb, they're leveraging crowd servicing, and they're leveraging virtual technology. So I want to stress that oftentimes when we think about virtual technology, we often just think about content, communication, and courses. But I wanted to highlight crowd servicing because that starts maybe shifting your thinking or allowing you to incorporate another kind of line of thinking when it comes to virtual tools. And of course, many of you are familiar with crowdfunding, and there's some factors there that you must consider as well. Maybe it's the cost, maybe it's the can they travel internationally, like I know we do business internationally, and so the ability to handle different currencies and transactions, and also what about the back engine, what about the tracking of the funds, IRS, who's going to get the report, with the company that you're choosing produce the report or someone else. Those are just some examples. And then the last, there's a number of things happening, especially in Europe and in Asia. It's called crowd tasking, and that's the future. It's not really popular here in the U.S. The crowd tasking is on the rise. And so again, these are just categories. When you start looking at tools to consider, you may perhaps start by defining or using these categories, and then when you're talking to a vendor or different vendors, just begin checking which box they fall into. And again, begin determining whether or not they can grow with you and make sure that your business is driving the conversation and not the reverse. So now that we've identified the category, this is where the rubber really starts meeting the road. It's interesting, 9/11 really shifts certain things down from, federal level down to the state when it came to technology. And what's right before our very eyes is shifting from a state level to actually individual. So individuals, we have to start really asking these questions, whether you're an individual doing fatherhood initiatives, whether you're a company, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a big business, you have to begin asking these questions about security and data governance. And so some of the words and some of the things to factor in is trust. It's not just do you trust the vendor, but the people who are now joining the virtual community, they're trusting you, that you've done your due diligence, that you've dotted your I's and you've crossed your T's around security and data governance. So they're trusting you. And because of your name and the relationship they have with you, they're trusting your vendor. they're also ensuring, you got to ensure that you're protecting. You know, what information is being recorded. We've seen a couple of companies, won't mention any, that had some real issues around protection. Regardless of the circumstances, there were some issues with protection. And then ownership and control. And I'm going to tie that to the data sharing for sake of time. There's a saying that whoever owns the data owns the business. So when you're looking at a vendor, do they own your data or do you own the data? And then when it comes to confidentiality, if they own the data and you're just using their service, the individual you're bringing into your virtual communication or learning or course, is it confidential or is it open to the public? And how would you govern the conversation and the interaction? One of the things on the left, you notice I have public and private. Consider before you even select a tool and before you push content at a course out on a virtual tool, or before you have a video conference call, ask yourself this question. What I'm about to share, is that something that I want to remain private? Or is that something that I really don't mind it going out to the public? And that will begin helping you as well when it comes to selecting your tool. And then last but not least, I want to end with these two rules here. Rule number 3 is mind, M-I-N-E, not M-I-D, mind your own business. Because if you're not minding your own business, someone else is. And so, again, whoever owns the data owns the business. And so we really encourage you when you're looking at virtual tools and you're looking at, selecting one, ensure that you are in control, that you're managing your business and you're minding your business. And then rule number 4 is look to buy technology before you try building. I've seen a lot of individuals, organizations, governments, they go and start building and investing sometimes tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars trying to build something, only to find out that they had to stop that project, stop that initiative for whatever reason. And they found out later that there was a tool that was already capable of doing what they were looking for. So again, rule number 4 is look to buy technology before you try building your own. So with that, I know I went through a number of things fairly quickly, and so feel free to shoot me an email. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and we can elaborate with any questions that you may have. But Nigel, if there's no questions, I'll turn it right back over to you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Yeah, you actually asked a question or two that appeared in the chat box there, so good job. I did want to remind you, actually, if you do have a question for the presenters, if you'd please put that in the box at the bottom that says ask a question. We are tracking the chat box, but it's hard to keep an eye on that all the time. And I did notice several interesting comments in it. I noticed Avis mentioning that you're coming out of this stronger and wiser, and that's certainly what we hope, that we're going to come out of this to a better world with a lot of lessons learned. So I'm now going to introduce Seth Graswell, Chief Executive Officer at Fathers Incorporated and our fearless leader here at the Clearinghouse. He's got a very nice picture up there, and you can see him on your screen as well. So you've got 2 pictures of Kenny at the moment, but yeah, he's doing all sorts of stuff. He's a leader around the country in fatherhood. He's just finished 3 Facebook Live sessions talking about co-parenting, which is going to be something we'll go back and feature again when we do next month's webinar. And he's just really, he's a pioneer in a lot of this virtual work. So he's going to talk to us about assessing and using technological tools. Time's yours, Kenny. I think you're on mute, Kenny.
Yes, I was on mute. Thank you again, Nigel, for hosting this and always being, on point and on time and doing these webinars and distributing information out there to the public, particularly about fatherhood programs, and to the rest of the panelists as well, Jeff, Justin, and my brother Patrick, who tricked me today, said he was going to come on and not shave and wear a sweatsuit, and he'd come on with a bow tie and a jacket. So that's just how siblings get down, I guess. Anyway, What I'm going to do today is really kind of talk to you about some of our on-the-ground experiences that we've had as a result, as a matter of the Clearinghouse, and also within Fathers Incorporated, because we are also doing a lot of virtual training right now, and we are learning day by day some of the nuances as it relates to trying to provide service and programs and resources to our cohorts and constituencies, and having to do that in a way that we have not had to do that before. And so I can move my own slides here. And so Jeff kind of really laid out a nice, comprehensive, high-level overview of the things that we should all kind of know about technology. And what I want to do is I want to drill down a little bit and really bring it home for you so that you can begin to kind of look inside your own programs, your organizations, and inside your own shops and personnel to kind of see where the rubber hits the road. I actually ran into one of those situations today that I'm going to talk to you about in just a second. But one of the things that as we are entering this virtual world and engaging in all of these technologies, one of the things that we have recognized that we had to pay attention to was the equipment that we're using. And so if you are someone who is using computers more than 4 to 5 years old, you're going to have some difficulty in running a lot of these programs and a lot of these platforms because of the amount of RAM space that they use, the amount of virtual space that they need to use them, some of the hardware equipment within them, your speaker cards and things of that sort. It's going to make it very difficult for you to do certain things. And I know many of you who have tried to get on webinars, and you know that every time you get on a different platform, whether it is Adobe, whether it is Zoom, whether it is Skype, they all want you to download some level of information onto your computer before you even start. And sometimes your OS system or either your system on your PCs are not up to date. And after a certain amount of time on computers, your computer can no longer continue to update that software. If you're beginning to get those messages where Mac or PC-related software says that it cannot update the operating system, that's a clear indication that your computer system may be a little too old. And then the third thing is internet access. And that is something that we have had to pay a lot of attention to, primarily because now we're not in the office anymore. If you're like me at home and you have your son who's 11 years old and he's playing PS4 and he's doing his online learning, and my wife is doing her teaching and she's doing streaming and I'm doing streaming, and every TV in the house is a smart TV and all of those things are on the Wi-Fi, everyone's phone in the house is on the Wi-Fi, you can imagine how much data you're using. And so I can expect that what people are running into is these plans where you have limited data to use. And so that's something that you really also have to pay attention to. How is your work paying, how is your work putting a drain on your Wi-Fi within your house? Because almost everything in our home is relying on Wi-Fi, even our security system. So it's important to get someone to come out to your homes and to your offices to make sure that you have enough bandwidth to be able to even get into any of the software programs that demand streaming, right? Because streaming takes a lot of space. And so, and everybody is trying to figure out how to do Zoom. They're trying to figure out how to look good while they're doing Zoom. They want to do podcasts. They want to do Facebook Lives. They want to do all of these things. But all of that stuff puts a drain on your equipment and your software and your internet. The fourth thing I want to touch real quickly is environment. And when I talk about environment, it is whatever platform you're going to use, particularly if your camera is on. Now, hear me when I say this. Particularly if your camera is on, environment is important. So it's important to know what could possibly go on behind you that you're not prepared to happen behind you if you have all of your staff watching you on your video cam. And so as you can see behind me, I have a backdrop that I've purchased to block everything that takes place behind me. That is my son going to the refrigerator every 15 minutes. That's my wife walking back and forth on her cell phone. All those things I've had to block from you so that you can't see those. One of the great things about Zoom, if you're using Zoom, is they have a component on there where you can actually put a virtual background. And that virtual background actually blocks things that are happening far behind you, but if they're really on top of you, you'll still kind of see them bleed through. I know you've seen some of the social media posts on streaming going wrong, right? Zooming going wrong. I saw a couple of these things. You've seen people who are literally carrying their phone into the bathroom, and their kids are jumping on them, as they're in the middle of meeting with some important client. So environment is really important. It's also important that when you're getting online, that you are making sure that everyone in your house knows that you're online. We've had virtual trainings, particularly with our fathers, and we've had to really kind of harness them in terms of letting them know that it matters where you are when you're online with us. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to another slide. And so your aptitude, right, your technological aptitude then comes into play, right? Because one of the things, and I might be taking many of you back on this one, and you may not be going back as far as I can go back, but I'm sure even if you don't remember having to use a VCR, right, you know what they are, and there's probably one in the closet in your house somewhere. But there was a time when the power would go out, right, and it would flash 1200, and it had instructions for you to, like, fix it and turn it back on. And many people struggle with being able to set up their VCR to not only tape their favorite shows, but to set it up so that they can tape their favorite shows when they weren't in the house. And so particularly the older generation, I would always have to go to my mother's house and fix her VCR. I had to go to my grandmother's house. I would have to go and we would have to fix these things. Dealing with technology today is almost the same thing on a much higher level. And so one of the things you have to ask yourself with respect to aptitude is, what is your comfort level with innovation, right? And so there's a lot of moving parts when you are engaging virtually, whether it is on Zoom or whether it is just a conference call, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of things going on, and you can get really frustrated by it not working for you, and it could be one little small thing that you're not doing. I ran into that today. I was trying to connect my camera, my professional camera, up to my computer, and I must have listened to 7 or 8 different how-to videos on YouTube to do this. And they kept all of them missing one component, that you needed this capture card, like to convert the signal from the camera actually into the computer. Everybody talked about the cord, but nobody talked about this little piece that cost $150 that actually translates the information going in. And I got frustrated to the point to finally I learned what it was, and I was like, all right, I just need to step away from it. But everyone doesn't have that stick-to-itiveness that I had in that. They get frustrated and then they give up. And what I'm saying to you is not to give up when you get frustrated by innovation. The second thing I want to talk to you about is your comfort level in multitasking, right? And so when you're doing Zoom calls, right, and Nigel and we are fortunate enough to have a team, you have actually no idea how many people are behind the scenes running this webinar. But many of you will try to do these things alone. And so you're trying to be the MC, you're trying to be the interviewer, you're trying to get your own points across, you're trying to teach, you're trying to make sure that the camera is going right, you're trying to make sure that your mic is on, you're trying to make sure that you're on the right place in your PowerPoint. You got all of these things going on. And when you don't have the level of multitasking, everything can go wrong for you. One of the best things to do is to have people that can take different components of your production so that you're not forced to try to do everything until you become good enough to do everything. Also, learning on your own. I talked to you about YouTube videos. And so I wasn't a big fan of how-to YouTube videos, but those things are great. And so if you're someone who would like to get deeply involved in technology, I would say go to YouTube and just type in how to produce a Zoom webinar, how to do Facebook Live, how to stream, how to whatever, and really take time in building your knowledge base as it relates to innovation. And then control. Jeff talked about this. How much do you want to control when you're using that technology? There's nothing more frustrating than not being able to mute everybody on the line. And so knowing how much control you have over the audience while you're trying to do a production is extremely important to know. And then there are the right tools for the right outcomes. This is kind of when we get down to the nitty-gritty. So many of you have funds from organizations and foundations and governmental entities to do this body of work, right? And now here we are struggling because we're not able to have those one-on-one interactions with the people that we typically have. And now we have to do these things virtually. And those are impacting your ability to be able to adhere to the outcomes within your grants. And so you got to begin to start looking at your programmatic goals and looking at those outcomes and now matching them with your ability to provide the same services virtually, right? And so for those of you who have not engaged any of your constituency virtually, and now you're forced to try to harness them to be able to serve them, you're going to have some difficulty in meeting your outcomes. For others of you who have always engaged with your constituency virtually, you're going to have an easier time because you already have them harnessed in a way that you can engage them. And so you got to start looking at the outcomes that you currently have and then match those up against the technology that you can use or that you can find out how to use to make sure that you're very honest with your funders about the impact that having to move virtually is going to have on your programs. And then as you are kind of looking at those virtual platforms that Jeff outlined in his presentation, within those technologies, figuring out what can you do and what can't you do via technology. There are some things, a lot of things that you can do using technology, and there's some things you just can't do. There's nothing like the one-on-one interaction, face-to-face interaction. But there's ways to compensate for those kinds of things. For instance, in Zoom, take advantage of the Rooms feature, right? The Rooms feature actually allows you to take participants in your Zoom class and move them into a room so that you could talk to them privately in a room and then bring them back into the main Zoom conversation. Again, there are great how-to videos out there that really teaches you about those components within Zoom and some of the other platforms as well. And then lastly, in this space, it is critically important for those of you who have programs and curriculums and other pieces of intellectual property, that you copyright and trademark that intellectual property. Because right now, everybody is on social media platforms and virtual platforms. And it makes it very easy for someone to lift your information and claim it as their own. Trust me, it has happened to me as recently as 2 weeks ago. And so, and our attorneys have advised us to copyright everything, to trademark everything. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have the great work that you spend years and years trying to build to go out there into hands that you can't control the outcome and the messaging by people confusing what someone else is using to be your work. And so that's, I just thought about that last night and I wanted to share with you. So really, really think about the usage of your curriculums. I think Avis asked a question in the chat a little while ago about privacy, right? And so then there's privacy with respect to your one-on-one relationships with your clients, and then there's privacy with respect to your intellectual property. And so you have to take those two things into consideration. Presentation, and then I'm done, And so it's important to know your audience, right? And so for those of you who are running fatherhood programs and you're doing curriculum and you're doing support groups, know your audience. Just like you're struggling to get along in this virtual world, your clients are struggling as well. Think about it. Your dads have never been introduced to Zoom. They've never been introduced to Skype. They've never been introduced to the virtual platforms that you're going to be asking them to do. And then once you get them into the platform, right, how do you harness them? Because, again, speaking from example, we have a virtual platform. We've just harnessed everything that we've done in Fathers Incorporated and created what we're calling our Gentle Warriors Academy. And all of our trainings and all of our curriculum and all of our workshops are within this one website so that we can harness all of the things that we're trying to do and all of the ways that we can do it. And one of the things that we're learning in our trainings, particularly with our dads, is that on any given night or any given day that you're running these programs, a third of your dads could be in and they could be locked in on everything that you're doing as a facilitator. Another third of your dads can be disconnected. They cannot have their picture on the screen. They could be in another room, not participating, not paying attention, any of those kinds of things. And then there's another set of those clients that are going to be outside. They're going to be somewhere else. You're going to hear their family yelling in the background. You're going to hear the dog barking. You're going to hear people screaming. You're going to hear all of those things going on. And so there's got to be some upfront training with your audience so that they understand the behaviors that they have to have as you are trying to train them. And then professionalism, right? And so how do you remain professional in these atmospheres just like you are in your own households, right? And see, one of the things that I've been really questioning lately as it relates to professionalism is how do you dress, right? Do you, just kind of lean back and just be yourself in your own house? But do you present yourself in front of your audience the same way that you would if you were standing in front of them? And that's all over the place right now. And so I've seen some people who have been on Zoom calls and things that I would never get up and get on the camera in that way. It's like, nah, you need to turn the camera off. And so it's crazy. You're seeing all kinds of things. But what I would say is in good taste. Right? Professionalism in good taste. We understand that you're home with your children. You're trying to do this work. You're trying to be proficient and efficient. But presentation is still one of the things that people are going to look for. And then the last thing is preparation. There's nothing like preparing for what it is you're going to do. If you take the time, if you're going to do a webinar, you're going to do a Zoom call, do some preparation. Get somebody on the phone and walk through the mechanics of what it is you're going to have to do before you get to your actual training or either your speaking so that you can iron out the kinks so that you're not so frustrated when you're in the mix and you're not getting it right and you're frustrating yourself, but more importantly, you're frustrating everyone else. And so take some time to pull your staff together to do run-throughs on any new virtual platforms that you plan to use and get proficient in using those platforms, and I guarantee you by the time you get there, you'll be doing a great job. And we'll probably not want to go back to the old way of doing business if you get good at doing it this way. And then the product. And what you're seeing now is the product. You're always focused on the product because you want to present a good product to your constituency. Lead by example. If you want them to be the greatest people that they can be in their lives, then present yourself in excellence when you're trying to work with your constituency as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That was a seminar and a half there. And somebody actually asked in the box if the webinar is being recorded, and it is, yes. I forgot to say at the beginning. So you will be able to access the full recording of the webinar. It's usually about a month before we get these up. We have to get them all FIBO-aided so that they're super accessible for everybody. You can, though, today, I also want to remind you, you can download the helpful resources list. Somebody was asking about links to the Sesame Street video. You've got links to the Sesame Street videos and a whole bunch of other resources there with links to click on in that document. You can download the slides and the bios. And I took Kenny's point in there about having an old computer because I was trying to get myself a backdrop like he's got for Zoom, and he explained to me I can't do that because I've got an old computer, and you won't buy me a new one. I don't know what the problem is. But anyway, with that, I am going to bring up our good colleague, Patrick Patterson, who, if you want to come up on camera with me, Patrick, and make sure you're unmuted. And, Patrick is one of the most skilled group facilitators I've ever seen in terms of the ability to generate enthusiasm and interaction in a group of people. And he's doing it online as well. So he's going to tell us about some of the stuff he's been doing and offer you some tips for doing this the same way online as you do it in person. Take it away, Patrick.
Thank you, Nigel. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're on.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys are well. I just want to spend a few minutes just appreciating the opportunity just to share while we're all learning. So the challenge and the opportunities I have, and I call it an opportunity, to share some of the things that we have learned and that we have been trying to employ in this new reality that we all live in. And so I'll ask Enzo or Nigel to advance the slides as I go through. As a backdrop, you can advance the slide. As a backdrop, I would say to Kenny's point and to Jeff's point, engagement is the most important thing. If you have been talking to your clients on a regular basis, the conversion to virtual is not as hard. One of the philosophies that I've done this work for almost 20 years is that if you can connect to me, you can correct me. And so the connection point is very important. If you're connected, if your staff is connected, if the case managers, the caseworkers, the job developers have relationships with the actual fathers that you're serving, it's a simple text or call to say, hey, we're not meeting in person Friday. We're going to be using this link. I will send it to you. Click this link. Super important to do that. In the space of presenting, if you've done groups with dads, everything that you've done in person is not necessarily translate immediately to when you're working with fathers through virtual platforms. And so here's what I always encourage. The groups that we've been doing, I've been working with a project in Charlotte on the weekends, just really practicing and engaging some guys who have really needed help beyond the current affairs. And so one of the things that we try to employ is using technology. A lot of guys are visual. It's just what are ways that we can get them to lean in. And so we can do an icebreaker. If you're on the screen here, I will post this, and I'll ask the guy, what did you call this when you were a kid? And I'm looking at the responses in the box, and that's the response that we get. A lot of guys are visual, and so think about things that encourage them to actually participate. Kelly Little, he's probably on here today, one of my colleagues who I co-facilitate with the program in Charlotte. We started out virtually doing a brief moment of silence, almost like meditation, and we literally will ask the guys to join us by closing their eyes. There's no prayer. There's nothing that violates anybody. But literally, he will guide us through a moment of just listening to your heartbeat and reflecting on people who have helped you over the years. And one of the things it allows us to do is really, to Ken's point, he said guys are really active, things are going on. It's amazing when we've done this to see them lean in. And to me, I almost equated with them actually putting their seatbelt on before you get started with your group. And so definitely think about icebreakers that can be helpful to them. Next slide. You can also use fun things to be engaging. One of the things that we've done is just try to make it relevant to the guys. And so if you're looking at this slide, this one is another icebreaker. It says here, if you were playing spades with this hand, how many books do you have? If I have any spades player on our webinar today, drop it in the box. How many books do you have? If you have the right number, we're going to be talking after this webinar to get me a spades partner. I see Candace said 4 and possible. She's a player. Okay, that's very good, Candace. But find fun ways to engage the guys. You can create memes, you can find memes, but the thing that we try to do is just really get them to lean in, to pay attention. Our groups, if you were doing groups for 2 hours, I would not recommend you try to do 2 hours on Zoom. We were doing 2 hours in person with the guys in Charlotte. We're now doing 1 hour. And I will say this, it's very interesting. We've had more participation via Zoom than you have in person or whatever platform you're using. And I think it's an access issue, but also think it's just a real-time issue where you don't have to worry about getting in the car, getting dressed, and going someplace. And so think about how you can use engagement strategies in the very beginning. One of my favorite people to watch present is a guy named Bobby Chad. He's a positive practitioner in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've watched him in groups with small and large groups, and one of the things that he does is he not just says the right thing, he says the real thing. And when you're talking to dads, particularly in spaces like this virtually, they're not tuning in to watch TV. They want to talk about real items that they're going through that they're struggling with. And so next slide. I want to close out with just 5 things that I think are just high point items that you guys should consider. Not listed here is fun. I believe you have to have fun. In most of our conversations we've had with guys, we've tried to interject space for laughter. We try to interject space for humor. We have done check-ins. We're all in the same conditions right now. And so we paused after the brief meditation or an icebreaker to ask, how you guys doing? There are several features on these platforms that allow you to do a thumbs up, a clap, or they can raise a question in the chat box. So I encourage you guys to use the chat box. The number one thing that I think people don't do, and Kenny made a point about this, is you should not try to be a solo artist. Find you a co-facilitator who can co-facilitate this. Let me tell you one reason why. I was on a webinar not long ago, a Zoom call not long ago, and the guy was hosting it, and his Wi-Fi went down. His Wi-Fi went down. And so you have all these people who dialed in. It could be your first-time father. It could be a dad who really have a burning issue, and your Wi-Fi drops. All the data that's being used, that is very possible. It wasn't even his fault. But if you have a co-host that's helping you to manage that, you can lose your Wi-Fi, and the co-host can still be holding the meeting. And so you want to have a co-facilitator. The other reason why a co-facilitator is important is you have a chance, while I'm presenting, Kenny could be, or Justin could be checking the chat box and could be monitoring that conversation so that people don't feel like they're making comments and they're not being received or responded to. And so you want to have a co-facilitator to provide that balance. It is the same as you would do in person. So let's not make this difficult or a science project. The second thing that I would say with your co-facilitator is making sure that you log in early, which is my first point. The first time we did the Zoom call, our session started at 10. I got on about 9:55, and there might have been 5 or 6 guys who were already on Zoom in the waiting room. And so you might assume that guys are going to, sometimes in group in person, they come in a little bit slow sometimes. You might assume that they'll be on late, but sometimes they can't even get in until you're in. You can lose people if you're late getting on, if you're hosting the Zoom or the WebEx call that you want to do. So you want to make sure you do that. Kenny made a point about breakout rooms. What I'm enjoying about learning these platforms is the ability to actually use rooms and space to convene conversations. So practice using that as well. Next slide. Number 3, in my experience, and I've just watched, so many people, David Kozar, Ada Stiles, use visuals to actually engage guys. This is no different. This is probably even more fitting, a platform where you'll see this box to the right. One of the things that we try to do is just make sure we keep guys engaged. And so I may post this visual, and it would say, name 3 good father and child activities. And you just, if you can allow, like you would in group, you allow the room to breathe. You allow people to get their thoughts together. A lot of times when people are facilitating, they try to fill every empty or quiet moment. So on these platforms, people are still thinking. They're still trying to find the button to get off of mute. And so you don't want to fill every space. So give guys time to share, in response to questions. But visuals help. If you are good at creating memes for your own social media, use that same talent for your program activities. It is a great way to engage you guys. Number 4, use open-ended questions. Give guys a chance to respond to questions that they can think about. One of the things that we started doing recently is creating case studies or scenarios. Very brief, very short, for you to ask them, what would you do in this situation? It is amazing to hear how many guys have to process things versus the guys who respond quickly. And so you want to use all the things that you use in person on the same platform. Kenny made a point, and I think you guys all know this, preparation is key. You cannot jump on here, I'm going to use a plain word, willy-nilly. You've got to prepare to engage these guys. Otherwise, just like in group in person, if it's not valuable to them, they're not coming back. And so you want to make sure that you prepare yourself for that. The other thing that's not listed on the slide that I would invite you to think about is, can you still, like you would in a group, invite guests? A couple of weeks ago, at the very height of everything going virtual, we had a child support expert on one of our Zoom calls. And he talked about what you need to do in the middle of co-parenting issues or filing for child support, you lost your job, how you minimize or lower your monthly payment. And to see the guys hustling to find an ink pen in their homes, sheet of paper to write down what this guy was saying. So you may not have to carry the burden of being the expert. You may be able to invite a person in to actually fill that space with good content. And so think about ways to use open-ended questions, but also invite guests in. And number five, at each gathering online, you want to make sure people leave with something. We started a practice of inviting at the very end of each of our Zoom meetings a chance for one of us to share jobs that are available. I don't know where you are, but in North Carolina, Amazon is hiring at $17 an hour, and if you do double time, it's $34. Overtime, it's $34 an hour. The food delivery spots are trying to find employees. The grocery stores, supermarkets are trying to get people to stock shelves overnight. If you are resourceful, you're part of the community, you know these resources, but it's important that each time you gather that you leave the guys with something that will help them better. The most amazing thing happened to us the last time we did a group. We did one of these kind of sharing of jobs, and the next time we got on, a guy jumped on in the middle of our Zoom call. He just was excited to be on. It's like he landed into a new area. He was so excited to be on, but what happened was a guy who he was connected to was on Zoom, took the link and shared it with another guy. Basically, word of mouth is how that happened. And we've had more participation virtually in that space. And so it's really important to think about all the things that you've done in person to transfer them with some modifications to the Zoom platform. The last thing I'll share, last slide, is be creative. You know, none of us are experts. I speak for myself. I'm not an expert in anything. But I have spent probably the last 4 weeks talking to Kenny, talking to Bobby Chad, talking to Avis, talking to Carl Chad Band, talking to the folks at OFA about what are things that we can try to implement on this platform. And one of the most exciting things that I've seen in North Carolina, maybe 2 weeks ago, was the first time I was a part of this. We did a virtual hiring event. We literally invited employers onto a space like this, just like I'm talking to you, and I would come on as a hiring manager and say, well, you guys in the audience, here's my address, here's our phone number, here's our website. We'd like to hire said positions, here are the salaries. And literally, after a couple conversations, I'm going to get a chance to virtually connect with you after my presentation to then interview you. What else can we do using a platform like this? I believe the first time we did it, 12 guys got hired that day. What else can we do with that? This past week, there were probably 70 people, it's growing now, that were part of the virtual job fair. We've had employers saying, I'd like to get on. This is a great way to reach employees or candidates for my position. And so another thing that we've done, if you're on Facebook, I know personally, I live in the Carolinas, and I started a Facebook group called Carolina Fathers. That page now, I started in May. I want to say the last time I checked it, we have almost 3,700 fathers who are across North and South Carolina. If I look at the analytics, there's about 16,000 conversations that happen in a month between the dads on the space, on that page. So think about ways that you can leverage technology. Most of the stuff is either low cost or no cost. Your own Facebook group, it's probably no cost for you to manage that, but you want to make sure that you have more than one moderator, administrator. I just cannot say enough. The guys' needs did not end when we became virtual. And so you want to try your best to reshape, reframe what you're doing in these platforms, but continue to give them quality. Be consistent. You cannot be late leading people. If you're supposed to be on Zoom, make it a consistent time that you're meeting. Do not change the times to here and there to meet the needs of your schedule. If you are going to do this and do it well, once we get back in person, this is a great time to try some new things that will advance for what you guys are doing. I want to close by saying thank you guys so much for the opportunity. And then to close, just really to encourage you guys, if you have young staff and they've not been a part of management activities, this is a great way to engage them. The young folks that are doing this work understand technology sometimes better than us. Engage them as best you can. Thanks so much.
That's a great segue, Patrick, to our next one with this. I don't know how young you are, Justin, but you've certainly got a vision of how you do this kind of work that is totally beyond me. But I did just want to underline one thing Patrick said about the idea about joining these online sessions early. I think that's just valuable time, the same way in a physical session, you're hanging out with the guys before session starts, maybe you're having food or whatever it is. But I think a lot of the real meat of what you do when you're forming a respectful relationship with the dads you work with is in that early time. So I certainly encourage you to get on early, as Patrick said. So with that, anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Batt, founder and chief dad officer for Daddy Saturday. Justin founded this in his own backyard with his 4 children, and it's now like everywhere. So, and he also taught me what an Alexa skill is. So anyway, Justin, educate us here.
Thanks, Nigel. Glad to be with you all today. So excited to share a few things. I think they brought me along because I'm an example of putting some of this into practice. And the way that I look at virtual technology, not only today, but going into the future in fatherhood programming, I think you've got 3 options as an organization or as an individual today. You can either build it, you can buy it, or you can borrow it. And so I've done a lot of building over the last several years, and specifically in the last year and a half. And I've bought a few things, and I am offering many things that hopefully you all can borrow as just one example of a fatherhood organization that's out there trying to put out content to help all of us move fatherhood forward together. Next slide, please, Nigel. So when I think about fatherhood technology, I come back to a couple of core things. One is I believe branding is very important. So if you think about a brand, your brand is the image of in the eyes of your audience, right? So think about your brand. The National Center, the National Fatherhood Council has a very strong brand, right? We have a lot of brands that are out there. So what kind of brand are you bringing to the table? We have the brand of Daddy Saturday. Daddy Saturday is a brand that started in my own backyard with my 4 kids. I was a corporate father who was supporting my wife as she had her business on Saturdays. So I had every Saturday by myself with my kids for the entire day. And I had what I call typically a dad hangover at the beginning of most of those Saturdays, where I wanted to be there being engaged with my kids, but was stressed out, tired, burning the candle at both ends like many fathers are, trying to provide for their families. And I wanted more for my time with my kids. So I became intentional, engaged them with a game plan for our day together, and built what we now call Daddy Saturday affectionately within our family, and is now our platform. And it really revolves around a couple of different components. As I started to learn more about fatherlessness and the burden of not only the lack of dads that are in the home, but the fathers who are there physically but that are emotionally absent, I did a TEDx. I wrote a book. And I started to put myself out there as a thought leader in the space, trying to help other dads connect with their kids and be intentional. So I think when you look at that, my desire was to say, if you look at that bell curve, and you've got 20% on the top end who are amazing dads who are doing a great job, like the guys you see in the top of the screen, who are getting it done every day, and like many of you that are probably on this call, these are the top 20%. And they need resources, but at the same time, they've kind of put themselves in a great position to be leaders in the market and to be collaborators with you. And the bottom end, you've got the bottom 20% who are, frankly, they're just not getting it done as dads. And they probably don't want resources, or they don't know how to access resources, and they're going to be a challenge to reach. But in the middle, you got that 60%, and that's the 60% that most of us need to be going after, because those are the dads that want to move forward and that you can truly help and make impact on. So how do you do that? Well, in our idea within Daddy Saturday, we created what we call an omni-channel platform that I'll unpack for you later. But the omni-channel platform includes all forms of social media, and we tried to create a platform that reaches fathers all across that spectrum, regardless of age, income status, demographics, so it appeals to everyone. And in order to do that, you have to be able to reach them through a variety of virtual and digital channels, because that's the way that we operate today, especially now that we're in the time that we're in. So we created a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is really for the kids, right? It's that fun flash and dash. You see my kids and I doing crazy stuff in and around our community in our backyard, and it gets the kids excited to say, hey, Dad, can we do this? So that's one way of reaching fathers is through their children using technology. Social media is also another great example, and we make use of all of the platforms, most recently TikTok now. I'm not crazy about it, but my daughter does dance, and so we've got some Dad Learns to Dance videos. We're taking advantage of that platform too. It's free, low cost, no cost, and it just causes you to create content. I think it's also a great principle for your audience of fathers to help them understand that not only do they lead by example, because far more is taught than taught, but within their children, it's important to recognize that we can't just be consumers today in our society. It's also important to be curators and content producers. And so these platforms can help encourage your fathers and your platform to do that as well as their children. Second piece is we delivered a book. It's the Field Manual for Fatherhood about being an intentional and engaged dad. It's the Daddy Saturday book. That's a cornerstone of any platform. And then we launched an Alexa skill and a podcast. The Alexa skill is very important because it allows us to reach that younger dad who's very technology focused and allows him to essentially ask Alexa, what should I do with my kids on Saturday? And Alexa will look at the weather in their area. She will provide an indoor or an outdoor activity based on the weather, and then she'll even put the items they might need for that activity in their shopping cart so they can order it directly from Amazon. And then she sends them an email with all the instructions for the activity as well as the items needed to complete it. So it's a quick, easy way to interface with fathers, and it's free, and it's available out in the marketplace. So that's something that you could borrow, right, and make use of for your audience. And there's lots of other opportunities like that. The podcast was another key piece because in our society today, we live in a micromedia economy. And what I mean by that is people have access to information on demand when they want it, where they want it. Think about in the past, if you had any sort of a commute to work, you would drive in and you had a 45-minute or an hour commute. You could listen to ESPN radio and maybe pick up something you wanted, or you could listen to NPR and maybe get some news information, 5-10 minutes of a segment that really interested you. Well, today, you could listen to 45 minutes of content that pertains exactly to what you want to learn about. So creating a podcast is a great way to get that information out to your audience and reach them directly with the content that they want. I saw on this webinar, we've got Woody Dantzler as one of the participants. So Woody was actually on my podcast. Woody's a former NFL player and an all-star quarterback at the Clemson University, Clemson Tigers. So thanks for joining, Woody. Woody was a guest on my podcast, and it was an amazing collaboration, and it was great content that my audience wanted to hear directly. Finally, we've got a couple of other things that we do. We've got Daddy Saturday live events, so we do these in person and virtually. Great opportunity for you right now is to capitalize on the virtual live opportunity. So we're doing this for a professional sports team next week for their players and their children, and we're doing a Daddy Saturday live event where we've got an hour-long session on Zoom where the dads and their kids are going to come in. We're going to give them activities to do right there on camera. They go off, they do the activity, hopefully on the camera so we can see them. They come back, we talk about it, we get some feedback, and we're showing them live what it means to be an intentional and engaged dad. But it's done in community, and as Patrick said, it's super fun and engaging, and it's a great way to bring them together. And then we've got a video series coming out called Dad Boss, which you saw in the entrance, that photo, which is a 7-part video series on helping dads be intentional and engaged in their fatherhood. And last but not least, we've got a 501c3 nonprofit. So then all the work that we do on the for-profit side helps us drive our nonprofit goal of impacting 10 million fathers in 10 years and ending fatherlessness and driving those 4 populations home. Next slide. So that's a little bit about what Daddy Saturday is. I talked about some of these goals. I think for your organization, too, it's really important to have your mission, vision, values outlined, and then everything you do in terms of a virtual platform has to ladder up into that. So when I think about our goals in Daddy Saturday, it's impacting those 10 million fathers in 10 years and ending fatherlessness. So taking an opportunity like this to join this level of a call and have several hundred people on this call who are all trying to impact fathers, right, that helps me achieve one of my goals for the organization. And so I think you need to look at your technology and say, how does my technology and the platforms that I have and the platforms that I can join align to the goals of the organization and align to the interests of my audience? Next slide. So here's a couple of tips. We talked about some of these, but I think a blog is a great tool. If you're not already blogging, let me say this, you are who Google says you are today. And that goes for yourself as an individual as well as for your organization. So when someone searches Google, what do they see when they pull up your organization? What do they see when they pull you up? I would encourage all of you to go and own your personal domains. So firstlastname.com, if your name's taken, then change your name, add a middle initial, or grab that. It's very valuable real estate, and do that for your children and recommend that for your audience as well. Something all of us should have today because it's going to be very valuable in the future. So justinbat.com I own, and I have all of my kids as well. It's a great place to hold your blog personally, and also for your organization, I would ask that you host a blog. Why? Because it's evergreen content, and it's building blocks within Google to help you index. So when people search for topics on fatherhood or co-parenting or any of those topics, your blog can be one of the great sources for that. It also allows you to do newsjacking, so relevant current topics, the quarantine, right? How to manage your family during the quarantine, great blog post, and that's going to be a hot item that may pick up some news media hits for you if you're blogging about that. And last but not least, you could do an interview series. So I could interview an expert like Kenny Graswell or Jeff Street and have them on, or Pat Patterson, my blog, and that interview now becomes a great blog post that you can do. So 3 quick tips for blogs, highly valuable. We talked about podcasts. Videos, I would say, are critical because when you look at people and how they interact with any form of technology, it's got to cover 3 bases. So first of all, it's got to be visual, right, where the video can absolutely help with that. It's also got to be hit their auditory senses. So the audio quality's got to be good. If you can have music or anything else in the background that can amp it up, even better, to get people pumped up during the breaks or in between. And then the last piece is it's got to be kinesthetic. So it needs to have people moving and being active. They can't just sit there the whole time. And so when you do videos, that's a great way to, or use video technology, it's a great way to hit all 3 of those senses at once. And that's what we do in Daddy Saturday Lives. We hit them with the visual, we hit them with the audio, and then we make them get up and get moving, and movement equals momentum. And finally, we talked about social media, YouTube, and then we talked about Zoom enough here today. I don't think we need to cover that anymore. But I would just say Zoom is an incredible platform, and Zoom specifically, but there's many other technologies that are out there, and I would encourage you to use those. Fatherhood should not be done in isolation, and right now you've got a way to break down a barrier with creating community using products like Zoom. Next slide. And so we talked about a little bit about having an omni-channel platform. So what does that mean? Well, when I looked at that bell curve of the 20/20 and the 60 in the middle, I recognized that we had to have a broad platform that could reach the audience across the spectrum. And so when you go back to that build it, buy it, borrow it mentality, I'd ask that you think about what in your organization have you currently built, and how can you leverage that to reach your audience? What would be of interest to them? If you haven't built it, then do you have the funds, or could you go buy it or partner with someone else to now bring that into your platform to round out that area that you may not have any resources in? And the last piece is to borrow it. So there's lots of free resources out there. Many of you have those. There's lots of great resources across this community, and go tap into those. And when you do that, you can create an omni-channel platform, and there's 4 pillars to that. The first is community. So again, it's hard to be a father in isolation. So how do you connect people through virtual networks and make those connections, which can be just as strong today in a virtual world almost as in a physical world, and you can break down barriers that didn't exist before. My example is we have Fatherhood Fellows, and those are our international fathers who are making a difference abroad in their local communities. We have a gentleman named Charles Coach, and Charles is in Kenya, Africa. And Charles and I connected on Facebook. We communicated through WhatsApp and Skype. And now we're doing virtual fatherhood summits and virtual meetings from my home in the Carolinas to his little schoolhouse there in Kenya. The coolest thing that's ever happened in my entire life, seeing that and being a part of that. And it's all done because of the access through virtual networks now in technology and building communities that could never exist before. Second piece is on-demand access. So think about your resources and what you're using in terms of virtual technology, and how many of those are static and how many are available on demand so they can be accessed at any time, anywhere, when the user wants to, or could be self-paced. And we've done this in 2 ways. So one would be the Alexa skill, right? They can access that anytime, anywhere. Our website is a repository of resources, daddysaturday.com. So make sure your website is built in that fashion. And then the third piece is we've built this video curriculum called Dad Boss that anyone can access on their mobile device or on their computer. And once they have access to it, they can view those courses at their own pace and on demand when they want to do it. And today's a little bit easier. We have a little bit more time margin. But when we get back to that new normal, right, the time margin starts to slide away again. It's important to have those resources be on demand. Additionally, the knowledge economy. Today, $300 million a day is spent on the knowledge economy. So learning, training, teaching online virtual products. They're anticipating, Forbes put out a quote that it's going to be $1 billion a day by 2025. So think about that for a minute. Are you capitalizing on the knowledge economy either by building, borrowing, or buying resources that are curriculum-based, that are virtual in nature, a video series, right, an info product, a curriculum that people can view on demand that ties into that knowledge economy? And last but not least, evaluate your current offerings. And when you look at your platform, when you look at your audience and how you're reaching them, do you have what you need to reach everyone in your audience in a way that's meaningful and impactful to them, that's going to cause them to engage? And if not, then innovate around that. What could you do to build, buy, or borrow to create a platform that you can reach your audience with? A big part of that for me was the Alexa skill, right? It was a way to reach an audience that I hadn't reached before. I think there's many different ways to do that, but I'd ask that you go back and examine those three core principles. Is it visual, is it auditory, and is it kinesthetic, in a way to do that? And sometimes, too, you can also look at your innovation and say, maybe is there a niche within a niche that I could carve out and serve a need that I didn't know existed? The example to the right that you see there is a product we created called Teen Girl Dad. It was after the Kobe Bryant tragedy, and it's a curriculum for dads and their middle school daughters specifically. And it was an innovation based on an event that happened in the marketplace, and it was a need that we knew existed in our audience, and it was a niche product that we innovated around to quickly put out there to address that need with those specific fathers. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of resources. So if you'd like to take advantage of our resources, you can go to daddysaturday.com. We've got the book, the podcast, the blog, the Alexa skill. There are many other resources, including assessment tools that we have on the site. And so as you look at your platform, as you look at the way that you're reaching your audience, I would say that you could use ours as a model. It's certainly not perfect. I have a ton to learn, but I've been gifted in terms of creating things and pushing out a lot of different products and opportunities. So borrow what's there. And there's some other great resources from Kenny, from Patrick, from Jeff, and from others that are part of this and outside of this specific community that are out there. And I would just ask that you guys look at those to really round out your audience and make your offering as robust as possible in this new virtual platform.
Thank you very much, Justin. We are just going to show one more little clip from Sesame Street for you here. I see a few people have been asking about it, and again, you can find this. You can find a link to this in the resources.
You're almost done. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Taking care of yourself is also taking care of others. We're all in this together.
So great. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Enzo. You know, as several of the presenters said, you can't do this without people in the background behind you. And so now we're going to do our Q&A. So invite everyone to come back to the screen here. We've got a few questions, quite a lot of similar, so I'm going to try and put some of these together here. Several people have asked about, what do you do? How do you connect with dads if they haven't got the hardware they need? You know, if they don't have a laptop, if they've only got a phone, if they don't have Wi-Fi access, if they don't have reliable access. What are some ways to get around that? I do know I spoke with Nick Maggio, who I assume is on the line. I haven't had a close look here, but he's one of our regular attendees here, and he's doing some work out in Southern California. And a good number of their participants, you know, they're low income, they're immigrants. they don't even have access to phones a lot of the time, or if they did, certainly don't have access to video. So a lot of times they're having to do their sessions, some guys on video, some guys calling in on the phone. But how do you handle guys who don't even have access to the internet or phone? Any thoughts on that, anyone?
This is Patrick. I'll just say a couple. Can you hear me, Nigel?
Yep.
Yeah. There's it's odd if you find a guy. I mean, there's Pew Research that says about 92% income dads have access to not just a phone but a smartphone. We've had guys who've not had the video ability but have been able to dial in. I've just not had the experience, just yet. There may be occasions where it does happen, but most of the guys that we are seeing, and that's including all these programs, they have access. If not directly, they can go to a local resource like a library.
Anyone else want to share? You want to share something, Kenny? I know you've talked about guys being on the phone when they're driving and stuff to join these sessions. But
Yeah, I'm multitasking now. I'm actually responding to people who are sending me questions outside of the chat. So, I would say not to discount good old conference calling, right? And so I think everyone is pressured right now to be on video because that seems like the thing that is trending the highest. But if you have constituency that is having difficult and not so much issue with technology, access is also a huge thing, where your clients do not even have access to computers. And right now they can't go to libraries and they can't go to public spaces. I saw there's one city the other day, I think it was yesterday, I saw that the school district is actually telling that do not have access to computers that they can access internet by sitting in the parking lot outside of the school, right? And so that is some of the realities that we're looking at, around this country. And so where you are struggling and getting your guys to hook up with you via video platforms, go back to telephone conferencing. That works as well. Keep all of the things that Patrick said earlier in place. That engagement really doesn't matter how you're connected to them. As long as you're engaging them, they're going to stay with you.
Yeah. And I also heard about some school districts where they're using school buses that are equipped with laptops so kids can go to them, right? You've heard about that, Justin, yeah?
Yeah.
And I
think,
go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, real quick. So I think that's a good idea. Now, I was going to say the same thing. There are community resources where, again, I think if we try to get people one-off, that can be a challenge. But I would tap into the power of community, and that's where those local leaders, right, can step up, and people that do have access to that can invite others that may not, and get those folks together. I think the other thing you can do is just go back to some of the old-fashioned technology too. So if you do a live video, and how do you record it, and then how do you make it available either through email or through a website or through other forms where someone then can go and access it later if they can't access it on demand at that time because they don't have access to Wi-Fi at that moment or a video type of phone. So I think there's ways to do it. Now, that's the point of having an omni-channel platform, right, is reaching people through every single channel possible to make sure you're equipping your entire audience with the ability to consume your content.
Yeah, great point, yeah.
Mind you, could I add one more? Can I add one more thing? Unconventional times. We get locked down in thinking that everyone is only going to engage in our curriculums between the hours of 9 to 5. That's not the case anymore. In fact, many of the classes that we're running right now and virtual online trainings that we're doing are after hours between everything from 6 to 7, from 7 to 9, and even 8 to 10. And we're getting greater participation with guys in the evening than you're getting with them in the daytime. And just think about this. It is in the daytime, in the middle of the day, their children are home. And so they're distracted by what's going on in the house. So you can't get them to narrow down and pay attention at 10 in the morning and 12 noon and 2 in the afternoon. And so play around with your times. And, I would dare say Look at Saturdays sometime, right? Sunday nights, on the weekend, and see what your numbers look like, when they engage. That's the only way you're going to know. Just try it.
Yeah, and there's no football on TV, so, Jeff, did you try to say something a minute ago?
Yeah, I was just saying that I think oftentimes when we think about technology, we integrate, especially with the word community being used in a very broad sense across the globe. Integration of technology doesn't mean collaboration of people. So I think if someone doesn't have a phone or a smartphone or what have you, kind of to Justin's point, truly leveraging the strength of a physical community and physical collaboration and incorporate that with virtual technology is very powerful. So you can do and both. So if there's someone or a group of people, or they call it the last mile, if there's a community that may not have internet or strong bandwidth, it can still rally around that community and meet the needs of the community. So I don't think that we have to say if they don't have a phone, there's no way to connect to them. If they can't go to the library, if they can't go to a faith community, others can really engage and mobilize their community to serve that person or group of people.
I've got a few questions that came in for you, Patrick, really about the way you manage the sessions, the virtual sessions. So I'm going to sort of try and combine some of these. But, one question is certainly that a few people are asking is how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them online with you to the end of the session? So you want to share a few tricks on that?
Yeah, I think it's the open-ended questions. I think it's a mistake that I made in the very beginning is, like, I see Justin's name on the screen, and I will call Justin because I just saw Justin, and then Justin has a daughter, and he has to move and go and, feed his daughter, and you have this silence. And so I just began to be comfortable in a space where I might say, someone else share, and just be quiet for a minute. I think the other thing is just as best you can, try your best to share personalized stories to get guys and have them respond to things in a real time and real. But I think open-ended, using audio visuals, and then limit what you would do in person. Typically, face-to-face, you call a name, but just allow the space to dictate the mood and what happens next. So don't feel that pressure to feel quiet moment.
Yeah, and I'd add to that in terms of the personalized stories, which are great. You've got to do that. But I always say, make sure you know why you're sharing the story. There's got to be a point to the story, right? So it's got to lead to the point you want to make. Right? Just staying with you for a minute here, Patrick. Somebody asked what curriculum you're using. I don't think you're using a specific curriculum, right? But also, if you're doing a session that is normally 2 hours in the classroom, do you cut that to an hour for a virtual session, or do you do the same kind of time frame?
Yeah, well, this program, we're doing a couple things. 24/7 Dads we've used, and then Connections to Success. It's a program out of St. Louis. One is workforce, one is fatherhood related. Yes, you have to condense. It's impossible to keep most of us online for 2 hours. And so you might think about what are the salient points. Ken said something earlier. Let your group dictate what the topics to be discovered, to be discussed, lead you. But, yeah, use the curriculum. Do not do this mumble thing. Have something that guides you so that the guys understand there's a structure to it as best you can.
The other thing, too, is, I was going to follow up to the last question, but my answer is actually perfect for this particular question. And that is, don't let every time you touch them be because you want something from them. Like, we're in a time right now where people just want to know that someone's thinking of them, that someone wants to know how they're doing, that someone wants to know if they have any needs. And so every once in a while, create something that's just a touch base. Like, you're not trying to teach anybody. You're not trying to run no curriculum. You ain't trying to run any program. You're basically just showing your empathy for what everyone is going through right now. And so I've always heard that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hey, Nigel, can I just add to that? I think, we're literally moving, and I think this time now with COVID has, Kenneth made a great point. Most of us think about virtual tools, and we only think about selling. We think about it just from a marketing perspective, and that's really because most of the marketing industry was affected first by social media. But there's so many other applications of social media beyond just selling. So, great point, Kenneth. I think that, it's easy to think about, hey, how do I sell a course? How do I sell content? And how do I get folks on? But also just connecting and serving. How do you do that without asking for anything in return?
And don't go overtime. That's the other thing too, Nigel. I think people make the mistake of trying to fill the time. We have tried to make a practice of ending early. If you do go beyond your 1 hour, it's because the guys want more information. But do not go overtime. They are not, like in real life, they are not coming back because you have gone over time. Time is important to these dads. So do not stretch it just for stretching's sake.
And, this is perhaps a question that we can't necessarily answer yet, but I'm just wondering, as you were talking about that in terms of the length of time, I mean, is an hour the optimum time for a virtual session? Can you do a 2-hour session virtually? Any thoughts?
I think it depends on the content, right? I mean, it depends on what you're presenting, what the content is. I think a 2-hour time is a very long time. I've got a background in training, and there's principles of adult learning, and principles of adult learning typically say more than an hour and a half. We need at least a 15-minute break. So, people's attention spans are so short these days. It's been recorded we have the attention span of a goldfish. So, with the ADHD prevalence that's out there, I just have a hard time going much longer than an hour to an hour and a half, even if the content's very good, because it's just a hard thing to do to keep people engaged that long. And so I would recommend that if you do it, then build breaks in, just like you would if you were doing a normal meeting. I think that's the thing that people sometimes forget is they act like just because it's virtual, it's different than if you were in a physical location. So you can build some of those physical location principles like you were holding a normal meeting or a normal conference into a Zoom-type setting, and it works extremely well. So you have a 15-minute bio break after an hour and a half, and people can come back, be refreshed, be recharged. Be conscious of, the meal hours and those kinds of things. So I think that's an important piece. The other thing I would say is that when you look at using technology today, there's another big piece that we kind of touched on, but it's that when you look at the audience that you're trying to reach, so many people are accessing technology and it's their first time using it, and they're just not comfortable with it. I come from a business and a professional background, so I've been using Zoom or these types of technologies for almost a decade, it seems like, at this point. So I'm very comfortable with it. Most times your audience isn't at that comfort level. So also make sure you're I don't want to say dumbing it down, but you're making it at an elementary level where the way that they can get on and get engaged is super simple. Once they're in, they kind of know the protocols and the rules, and you've gone over the ground rules like Nigel did. And you make it super easy for them to interact, and you point out the ways that they can do that, because most times they're just confused. And if people aren't secure in the environment, they're going to be less likely to participate at a high level. And then I think the final thing I would say is that give more than you get. So, these are like these amazing sessions. I see all the comments, so good, so important, so impactful, thanks for the content. And that's amazing. But it's like going to an amazing conference, right? You walk out, you're all jazzed up, but then what happens after that? And so I think the last piece is make sure you've got resources and accountability pieces and action points in place that people can take away, so it just doesn't become a flash in the pan, and you can extend that engagement and that interaction with your audience, and they have true long-lasting impact beyond just the Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, Justin, because that's the case management function for programs, right? So after the session, you've got to follow up with guys individually. So that could be a phone call. And I take the thing on bathroom breaks. Just make sure guys don't take the phone or the device to the bathroom with them, right? So because that's also to your point. You've got to train guys how to do this, right? So I think, and this is some of the questions that have been coming in too, and you guys have talked around so many of these questions without me even asking you, but I think it is, it's a case of teaching the guys how we're going to do this. So before you get them in the virtual session, right, you want some one-on-one, you want to talk to them about this is how we're going to do it. But that leads me to another question just on interacting on facilitating the groups. You know, when you're doing it in person, there's always that person who talks too much, right? And there's always those people who don't talk enough, and that they will learn to start talking more. One thing I'm seeing with a feature like this, the quiet people can chat in the box, right? What do you do virtually, though, when you've got that person who's dominating the talk time?
You know, you asked the, again, it's kind of one of these answers that goes for the question before and for this particular question. The question that you were asking, that I heard you ask before, was, can you still do 2-hour trainings? And my answer to that is yes, if you understand the difference between teaching and facilitating. So if you're teaching, you're standing in front of people and you're cramming curriculum down their throat with no thought about that interrelationship between you, that authenticity and that transparency, because you're trying to get curriculum through. But when you're facilitating, you know, what I know about all the fathers that I've served over the umpteen years I've been doing this is that much of what we're trying to train them in is already inside of them. The best facilitators know how to get their curriculum out of people as opposed to trying to get curriculum into people. If you can get the curriculum out of people, then you can allow their conversation, their interaction, and the interaction between you as a facilitator and your client can come off the best way. And then lastly, I would submit this. If you're boring on the phone, you're probably boring in person too. And so there's no skill set for whether or not you can be interactive on the phone as opposed to interpersonal. I think that whatever your personality is bleeds through whatever communication mechanism you're using. And so if you're not having a good time or a good way in getting people to interact with you through this social media platform, you should also look and evaluate whether or not that is the same problem you're having when you're one-on-one and in person with individuals. And so I know that might hurt some people, but I've sat in some classes and those hours you can't get back. And so I always say to myself, the last thing I'm trying to do is steal somebody else's time.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, Kenny. I mean, the most important thing that happens is what you do with the guys, how you get that back, how you make this whole thing happen, right? And that's a skill. Everybody can't do that, you know. So, and I think, you know, if you've got the set of skills to do it in the room, you've got the set of skills to do it with this technology. You just got to learn technology. That's the basic message. We are right at time here, and we've answered most of the questions. There's one question that was one of the earliest ones. So I was going to ask you each to leave us with a final thought. I'm going to ask you each to leave a final thought on this. And then I just want to remind everybody before we go that the recording will be posted. You can sit back and watch this all over again. You can share it with other people. It'll be posted in about a month probably on our website. You can still download the resources and the slides if you haven't. And after this ends, you'll be prompted to respond to a brief survey. One question on there is asking, if we do another one of these webinars, which we're thinking of doing in June, a follow-up to this, where we would involve some practitioners actually who've been, by June, doing this work for a month or two, we're going to have some folk on to continue this conversation there. So if you've got further questions, issues you'd like us to talk about in that webinar, please let us know. And I know we're over time. I really appreciate you staying with us. I see most of the audience are still here, so really thank you for that. But the final question for you all, just to sort of offer some insights on, and this is in terms of what can dads do to inculcate values in their children? You know, how can dads take advantage of this time right now if they're in the home with their kids to do some things that maybe they haven't done so much before? And you can also, if you want, talk about what can they do if they're not in the home. But how can dads take advantage of this time? I'll just let each of you respond to that very briefly. Sorry about that. But you want to go, Patrick?
Sure. I think it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. But I really personally enjoy with my daughters and my wife this time, talking, playing games, playing card games. We have made kites. We put a tent in the backyard. Really just talked about my favorite birthday when I was a kid. Things that, as the business of life happens, you don't have a chance to settle like that. But really just doing that. Meditation has become central to my family, not just me. But spending that time, just quiet time together. But I think there are things that don't cost you that you can do. To your point about guys who are not in the home, I would just say technology is still your friend. I'm finding dads who are reading books via FaceTime. I'm finding dads who are giving audio messages and sending it to the mom or to the grandmom to share with the kids. And so it's just being creative, but just really time. T-I-M-A is how kids spell love. Time.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Jess, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my daughters and I, we've actually been doing a lot more cooking together. So we would, we'll get on, I think we use Pinterest, and we'll look for menus, and then we'll go to the grocery store, and then our recipes, and we'll go to the grocery store and bring it back and cook. And so it gives us some quality time together. We're able to have some real conversations about what's going on around the world, but it's just daddy-daughter's time, which is really cool.
Beautiful. Yeah. Have we lost Justin? Are you still on the line, Justin? We haven't got you on the video anymore.
He had to leave.
He did have to leave. Okay. Well, we certainly appreciate his time. So that means, Kenny, you get the final word here, sir.
I would say, use this time to dial in, to be present, to pay attention, to be intentional. We have a saying at the Clearinghouse that started with take a moment to be a dad today. And that has kind of morphed into our new hashtag Connecting Dad message, which is take a moment to make a moment. Dial in, be present, reintroduce yourself to your family, in ways, and reinvent yourself. Be innovative, step outside of the box. I've even struggled with it, a few weeks ago with my own seriousness about the work life. And so where everything else is kind of ramped down, I've ramped up. But I had to pay attention that as I'm ramped up, I'm at home ramped up. And so, my son is running back and forth. My wife is doing what she's doing, and I'm dialed out. And I had to reassess my own behavior and dial back in and be like, nah, you're at home. Your responsibility now is to also make sure that your family's well-being is at the level that you want everybody else's well-being to be. And so, I had to get outside of some of my comfort levels. I got to go out in the driveway for an hour and a half and play basketball with an 11-year-old boy, and I don't have 11-year-old energy. Right? I gotta, I'll say I gotta. I'm going to say I love sitting down, listening to my wife talk. And talk to me, and talk to me, and talk to me. But that's my deposit into my family, right? The deposit into my family is if I deposit myself into them, they're going to deposit themselves into me. And so I would say, really dial in and cherish the moment. It's unfortunate the way that we receive this time, but time nonetheless is still valuable. And now that you have it, make the most of it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I certainly know that I remember, I've been working at home since 1997. I remember when my son was maybe about 12 and saying to me, Dad, you're a workaholic because it's hard to switch off when you're at home sometimes, right? But so it turned back on again, yeah. And I always thought I was lazy. I didn't think I was a workaholic at all, but there was one thing I did want to bring your gentleman's attention to right before we leave. There was one person who remarked, why do you all look so much younger and nicer in your bio photos?
That's why you keep your high school photos. You never throw your high school photo away. You never know when you're going to have to use it again.
Right.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of other questions come in. I'm really sorry, folks, that we haven't gotten to all of them, but we have answered most of them, I think. So, but we will We will get back to you either by posting these online when we post the materials. As I said, this is a conversation we're just starting. We're going to continue the conversation. And everybody who's still online with us, I still see there's an awful lot of people online, so I really appreciate you staying here. And we'll catch you next time. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah.